You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look at better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheap again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of What If Deku Joins Avatar: The Last Airbender. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of Dragonfire 217 on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Once inside the bathroom, Katara leaned on the counter and stared at herself for what seemed to be minutes before she even blinked. How in the world did I end up in a place like this? She muttered to herself. She turned to the tub and then realized she should have asked him probably the most important question of the night. Crap, how do I work this thing? She stared at the silver faucet and handle trying to make her best guess to how the worked. She could see the plug obviously went to the drain. Step 1-1. Now she looked to the handle and gave it a partial turn, immediately followed by water draining out of the bottom. Okay, so that works at least? Her hand felt the water and shivered slightly at the touch. Okay, so maybe I have to turn more to get it warmer. Deciding to pull it all the way, the water rushed out faster and began to release humidity as it poured. She smiled, seeing she was right. Perfect. I guess that wasn't so hard. Katara stood back up and began removing her blue robes and setting them on the countertop. She could smell the slight odor seeping from the cloths and scrunched her face in embarrassment. Geez, I hope they didn't smell me when we were eating dinner earlier. Sighing, she continued to remove the white bra and leggings she wore underneath until she was finally free. She was never one who reveled in being without clothes, but she had to admit it did feel good to be out every once in a while. She opened up the cabinets underneath the sink and found a few towels sitting there. Well, at least I don't need to drip dry. Her eyes then noticed the thick layer of steam that began forming in front of her eyes. What the? She looked back to the tub and saw the water was near the top filled with scalding water. Crap, I guess I made the water too hot. She quickly shut off the faucet and touched the surface, yanking back from the intense heat. Yeah, definitely too hot. Luckily for her, she had the perfect fix for that. Placing her hands towards the water, Katara blew out a cool gust of mist from her mouth, creating a stream of ice crystals. The cold air spread across the surface, a slight sizzling sound erupting from the top as its temperature dropped. After a few moments, she stuck her finger back in and smiled when it was just perfect for her. Stepping in, she let out a satisfied moan as the warm water enveloped her body. Now this is exactly what I needed. Feeling the knots and aches in her body melt away, Katara leaned her head back against the tub wall and stared up at the ceiling. She sat in silence for probably 10 minutes, her nerves and body still slightly on edge to this strange place she was in. She was eternally grateful for having someone kind like Tensei help her, but she still had the entire problem that this was not her home and would somehow have to make her way back. Her mind began replaying the events of the last few hours in her mind over and over again. Just earlier she was with Aang chasing firebenders through the woods. She came across an enraged spirit and somehow ended up in this place, one that was so different than the one she knew. And to make it worse, they had no knowledge of the place she came from, which meant finding a way back would be even harder for her. She could always look for a library around here and wait. She sat up from the water and remembered the books that Tensei had shown her before she came in here. I can look through those books and see if there is anything similar between our worlds. She began draining the water from the tub and grabbed the towel. Drying herself off vigorously, she wrapped herself up and opened up the door to the bedroom and was met with the sight of some clothes on the bed. She smiled and lifted up the oversized white shirt and shrugged. It would be odd if he had clothes my size already. Can't be helped. Slipping the shirt over her body, she chuckled seeing it hang on her like a dress. She then pulled on the baggy blue sweatpants and threw the towel back into the bathroom. She opened up the door back to the main living room and turned towards the office. Before she entered, she could hear the light snore coming from the end room, obviously being Tensei's room. She made sure not to be loud and entered the center door. At first she was annoyed by the darkness, but then remembered the bathroom and felt on the wall until she found the switch and flipped it on. She grinned when the lights flicked on and lit up the place, allowing her full access to the large collection of books. "All right, where to start?" she muttered as her eyes ran along the many titles he had. "I am sure glad I ended up in a place with the same language," she joked as her eyes came to the encyclopedia books he mentioned. "This should have what I need. Okay, AEFSW." She grabbed the matching book to each letter she mentioned, hoping in some way she could find traces of her home. He carried the 5 books over to the spare desk in the corner and sat in the chair. Opening up a first, she skimmed through the pages to the area she needed. "Okay, air nomads, anything," she murmured as she came to the air section. Her eyes scanned up and down the list of different terms. Air blast quirk, air blow quirk, air walk quirk. Her finger stopped scanning when she reached the words with edge. Her heart felt a slight ache when she found nothing about airbending, air nomad monks, or air temples. Maybe this book isn't updated. She tried to convince herself as she moved the book out of the way and opened the E. She flipped through until she came to the Earth section. She looked back and forth, trying to find anything from earthbending to Earth Kingdom. But the closets she could find were different Earth quirks that didn't sound anything like bending. Her heart began to beat faster as she once again didn't find anything referencing the Earth Kingdom or any of the cities. She slipped the book aside and flipped open the next one. If there was anything about the Fire Nation's history, there is no way that would be ignored. Katara sped through the book until she reached fire. Her eyes grazed over every term of fire quirk, trying to find anything similar to what she knew about firebending. She could see so many terms and names describing what they could do. Fire manipulation, fire creation, fire resistance, fire breathing. So many things. If they were firebenders, they would definitely say something like that. Her worry began to increase as she looked further in the book to find anything about the Fire Nation, the Fire Nation attacks, or even the term Fire Lord, and yet after several passes, she came up with not a single thing relating to her search. Her finger stopped scrolling down the pages as she finally passed fire. "No, there can't be nothing," she warningly said as she snatched up the S-book and flipped back until she reached what she hoped would be the best chance of hope. Spirits, spur. Her heart felt like it stopped when she read the one word after spirits. Folklore. Sweat started dripping down her forehead as she shakingly held the book. Spirits in this world were only legends and fairy tales. They were not real. That means they do not exist here. Her thoughts came to the realization that was always in the back of her mind, and yet she tried desperately to ignore. The fear that she was feeling when she saw the changed world and felt so out of place. There was nothing regarding anything to her home world. Katara sat in utter silence to the pain she began to feel inside her chest. Her breath came in shallow gasps, and she stumbled out of the chair to lean her back against the wall. She slid down to the floor as her knees pulled up into her chest to try and comfort herself. But it just made her feel more secluded and alone. She didn't even bother to try searching for waterbending, for she knew what the answer would be. Her bottom jaw began to tremble as emotions she was trying to hold back were beginning to make their way to the surface and reveal themselves. Images of people important in her life began flashing by, reminding her of the pain she was being tormented with. Sokka, Dad, Aang, Toph, Zuko, Suki, Gran, all of you. Vision began to blur as tears started to flow outward. I never even got to say goodbye to anyone. And now, she brought a hand to her mouth as her breaths became ragged, sniffling with every gasp. I don't know if I'll ever be able to see you again. I'm sorry. Her dad, grandmother, and brother would hear from Aang what had happened to her, thinking the worst that she was dead. Then there was the many great friends she had made over the course of her adventures. Lifelong bonds she would not ever have broken were now severed instantly. And then there was Aang. Her tears flowed freely when she thought of the Avatar. It was he who started her on the grand adventure she had experienced over the last 7 months of her life. He who pushed her to join him to the North Pole to master her bending, and aided him through his battles with the Fire Nation. He was always there for her when she needed it, and she would have been there as well. And then, he had revealed his feelings to her. Her eyes clenched shut when she remembered him kiss her before the invasion, instantly telling her that he truly thought of her as more than a friend. He then tried to tell her during their stay on Ember Island, revealing to her he always loved her. And what bothered her most was the fact when he revealed this to her, the secret burning inside of his chest since the day he met her. She chose to say the only thing that could come to her mind at the time. That she was confused. Katara gritted her teeth in frustration thinking about what she had said. Her best friend revealed how he had felt, and she had shot him down because of the fear in her heart that she was afraid to admit to him and even to herself, that she really didn't know if she loved him back. And now, she would be stuck in limbo because he would never be able to find out from her the truth. All she could do now was be reminded of her mistake, gripping her legs tight and bury her face into her knees and weep. "I am sorry. I'm so sorry, Aang." Katara continued to cry for what felt like an hour, unable to get up from her position. The only reason she slowed down was the fact she was running out of tears to cry. Her breathing began to stabilize and her nerves leveled out as she laid her head back against the wall behind her. She stared up at the blank ceiling, her mind slowly beginning to take in the fact that she was in a new place and time different from where she came from, and as far as she knew at this point, perhaps this is where she was going to have to live. When you're a waterbender in a strange land, you do what you must to survive. The words of another bender she hoped to forget reappeared inside her head, bringing a frustrated grimace to her face. Not even your situation was to this level, Hama, she sneered to the demon from her past. Realizing to where her search had led, Katara forced herself off the ground and turned to leave the room before stopping herself. She wanted to go back to the bed in the room she was given and curl up in the dark. All she felt like doing was sit alone and try to get some rest for herself. At this point, however, her nerves were on such a high from her situation she knew there was no way to fall asleep. She would be laying there for hours just being reminded of the pain she just stopped crying from. The only way to keep herself from losing it again would be to have something to distract her with. Turning back around, her eyes met the books still sitting open on the desk. "If I am up, I might as well," she sighed to herself and walked back over, gathering them up and restacking them. She stepped to the shelf and pulled out the book with a Q on the spine and brought it to the countertop along with the others. "Perhaps someday I may find out a way back home," she muttered out loud while flipping it open. "Until then, this is where I will be, so I should know everything I can." She skimmed through the pages until she reached the section she had been curious on since the moment she heard the words. Perhaps the most important and common thing she was going to experience here and should know what she could about it. Once she found it, she took a deep and began. "So, what is a quirk?" And so she began her research. The alarm next to Tensei's bed stirred him up from his slumber. He forced his eyes open and mumbled to himself. "Ugh, I don't know why I said it so early this morning. I don't have much set for the day." He rolled over to slap the alarm off and stared at the time. "It's only 6. Great job, Tensei." He rubbed his face for a few seconds to wake himself up, huffing out and sitting upright. He walked out of his bed and slipped his shirt on over his body. He grabbed his phone and scrolled through his messages to look back to what he had sent last night to remind himself, seeing all he had planned was a day of paperwork he was slacking on lately. But now that he was up, he knew he couldn't simply fall back asleep. Might as well do some of that work now, he sighed to himself and slipped on a pair of socks. Walking out of his room, he made his way to the left and turned to open his office, but was confused when he saw the door open and the lights already on. "Huh? I know those were off last night and—" His voice slowly trailed off when he saw the sight before him, bringing a large grin to his face. "Ah, I see." Katara was leaned over the side desk that he had in the room, multiple books spread out across the top of it. The young girl was face flat against one of the open encyclopedias. Obviously exhaustion took over her body from reading. Her hanging hair was strewn out everywhere, some of it blowing in and out from her open mouth breathing. The sight of her in this position brought a chuckle to the turbo hero, walking over to the couch and grabbing a spare blanket and carrying it over to the young girl. He draped it over her shoulders and glanced to the pages she was reading before she passed out. "What do we have here, huh?" He pulled one of the books up and raised an eyebrow. "Refrigerator. I see you weren't joking last night." He set the book back down and walked out of the room to the kitchen. He pulled out a bowl from the cabinet and reached for the cereal as well. He was about to open it up before he sat and thought for a few moments. His eyes drifted back towards the office, and he felt a little guilty having her stay here alone while he went into the agency for the day. If she really was new to this city, lifestyle and world, maybe leaving her alone her first day wouldn't turn out the best. I'd come home, and she burned the place messing with the stove. He shivered at the thought before picking his phone up and dialing it real quick. He waited a few moments before he heard it answer. Yes, can you cancel my appointments for the day? Some stuff came up. Family emergency? You can say something like that. He waited a few moments before nodding. Perfect. I'll see you Monday. Goodbye. He clicked it closed and smiled. Well, since I am here too, might as well introduce her to them. Katara slowly felt her mind stirring awake, forcing her eyes to slide open. She mumbled to herself as she sat up from the desk and gave a small wince. Oh. She reached up and rubbed the back of her neck and felt a tight kink. Great, falling asleep like this wasn't the best idea. She grunted to herself and tried to stand up, shocked when she felt a blanket fall down from her back. Huh? Looking down at it, she remembered she never put one on last night, meaning someone placed it on her at some point. A small smile crept on her face at the act, appreciating her host even more. A big yawn left her mouth, and she stretched out her back, feeling a few pops escape. Sighing in relief, she looked back down to the books before her and rubbed her head. I guess I overdid it last night. Her mind began replaying the random assortment of things she attempted to take in the night before. Cars. Fridges. Countries. She lost count of how many things she read last night, and after a while they began to blur in a giant mess as her exhaustion crept up and took over her mind. Trying to learn as much as she could in one night was definitely far too much for her to process and understand, now knowing she should pace herself a bit better if she were to get a true feel of this place. She turned around and took notice of her water tribe robes folded on top of the main desk. Wait, how did those? Katara questioned stopped when she noticed a note on top of the clothes. Katara, I took the liberty of washing your clothes for you. I hope you don't mind. I have guests you should meet and would look better with you in these than the ones I loaned you. Breakfast will be waiting for you. While she was extremely grateful, Katara took note of what he had said halfway in the note. Guests? Her ears suddenly picked up light chatter on the other side of the now closed office door. She looked down to the baggy clothes she sported and felt her face grow a light red. If his brother thought of dating last night, I don't want to know what they think of me in his clothes. After a few minutes of stripping her current set off and redressing in her standard look, Katara gave a small huff of satisfaction being back to what she knew. She straightened her hair and took a breath before reaching for the handle. Here goes nothing, I guess. Pushing it open, she was met with a wonderful aroma of scents from the kitchen. Her stomach immediately growled in anticipation to what it had coming its way, but then her eyes met not just Tensei, but two other adults in the kitchen with him, all turning in unison to the new guest. Ah, so you are awake now, Tensei smiled as he walked over towards her. I hope the desk wasn't too uncomfortable for you. Katara blushed and rubbed her head. Sorry, I was reading and kinda lost track of time. It's okay, it happens to all of us. Come in, I'd like to introduce you. He guided her over towards the other two there in his place. Katara, these are my parents. Mom and Dad, this is Katara that I told you about. The two adults were around 50 or so, the man with short dark blue hair and a slight line of stubble on his chin. His mother had shoulder-length hair of the same color, along with glasses over her eyes like her other son. Deciding to be polite, Katara smiled and gave a bow to the two of them. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Ida. Mrs. Ida had a large smile on her face and walked forward. Well, it's good to meet you too. Tensei didn't tell me you were so pretty. Really, Mom? Tensei sighed as he saw Katara blush. Miss Ida giggled at their embarrassment and waved her hand. I'm just teasing you, Tensei. It's a pleasure to meet you too. I am Madoka Ida, and this is my husband, Toki. Katara looked up to the older man and smiled. Pleasure to meet you, sir. The honor is all mine, Toki answered with a grin. I heard from Tenya that there was a new guest staying here and wanted to meet her. Katara's sweat dropped at that statement. He did now, did he? Did he tell them he thought I was some new girl Tensei was dating? She mentally moaned. Luckily, the mother Madoka grabbed her husband's arm. Oh, come now, let's grab our food and not make her wait eating. As she watched the family gather food together, Katara felt a nice warmth flow over her body from the positive energy here. She followed them to the table and sat down across from Madoka. She was leaned back as Tensei came in and slid a glass of water and a plate of food in front of her. She looked down and felt her eyes widen in excitement. Wow. The plate was loaded with several eggs, a few pieces of ham, and what seemed to be chunks of potatoes grilled up and covered with seasoning. She felt her mouth water and her stomach growl as the wonderful scents reached her nose. She would have scarfed it down with her hands then and there if she was alone. The only thing stopping her was his parents sitting there. Holding back her urges, she waited until Tensei delivered the other plates to his parents and sat down himself. So I didn't know how you like your eggs. If you prefer a different style, I can make you new ones, he asked as he sat down in the chair between Katara and his mother. No, these are perfect. Thank you. Katara responded and grabbed the utensils next to her. She grabbed a few potato chunks and brought them up and took a bite. It took all of her willpower to hold back the moan of pleasure she wanted to let out from the amazing taste. This is really good. Tensei chuckled at her response. I'm glad you enjoy it. I've always been a potato fan myself. The family ate quietly for the first 2 minutes as they enjoyed the breakfast before Madoka broke the silence. So Katara, I hear you are here to study Japanese culture. Katara finished chewing the eggs she had before responding. Why yes, I was given the chance to come and experience Japan, so I took the opportunity. Okay, that answer is seeming to work. Katara grinned internally as she took another bite. Toki took a sip of coffee and nodded in agreement. That is nice. So how did you get to stay with my son? Katara froze mid-bite. Crap, we didn't talk about that. It was through my agency actually, Tensei interrupted. One of my associates was talking about a fundraising event to bring in people from outside Japan to come and experience life here. There was a mistake in her paperwork and she was stuck with no place to go. So I told him I could offer my service. Really? Awa, I'm sorry to hear that, Madoka said. Katara simply brought the water up and took a sip. MHM, she mumbled, trying to hide her awkward glances. Nice save, I was screwed there. Toki accepted the story and smiled. Wow Tensei, that is very kind of you. You have always been generous with others. It's the least I can do, father, Tensei answered. I learned this from you both. His mother couldn't help but smile to the compliment. Awa, thank you, sweetie. So, Katara, what have you liked so far about your stay in Japan? Finishing her plate, Katara sat up and wiped her mouth. It's only been a day, but I am really surprised by how different it is than my village. Oh, how so? Well, it is much more different than any cities I have been to, and I am very shocked by the quirks here. Both parents gave questionable looks to what she said. What do you mean? Katara suddenly felt her neck sweat, thinking she shouldn't have opened up this conversation. She, however, kept her cool and decided to go with it. You see, where I'm from we only really have quirks that involve elements like water, earth, or fire. We don't have quirks like your sons. Toki sat back curiously to this. That is very interesting. What is your quirk? Sitting silently for a few moments, Katara decided the best way to play along was to demonstrate. Well, my quirk is waterbending. She placed her hand above the glass and lifted it, pulling the water out of the cup in a single fluid stream that began flowing through her open fingers. I can manipulate water and control it however I want. Oh, I see. That is a very nice quirk. Toki watched as the water flowed through her hand like a graceful snake. It seems you have great control of it as well. You must have trained a lot. Yeah, you can say that. Katara nodded as she placed the water back into her cup, deciding not to go in depth what she could really do with her power. And I must say, Katara, I love your outfit you have on, Madoka said as she leaned in looking towards the young girl. Tell me, is this from your village? Oh, this? Katara looked down to her robes. Yes, this came from my home. Oh, I love the colors. They are so pretty. It makes me want to see what other designs you brought. Katara felt extremely awkward at the request, once again having to think on the spot. Oh, a funny thing. I lost my clothes on the train ride here. Hee hee. Madoka's mouth dropped at hearing the situation. You lost your luggage? That's terrible. She quickly stood up and marched over to the waterbender and placed her hands on her shoulders. You can't be here without anything else to wear. Let's go. Now the gears were cranking in Katara's head as the elder woman gripped her shoulders. Ooh, go where? We are taking you shopping. Tensei sat frozen mid-bite as he stared at his mother. Crap. Katara really couldn't tell what was more awkward. First, there was the situation that they were told by the chief that they were supposed to lay low after the entire predicament she caused when she came here. Damage, disturbing the peace, and using a quirk while technically bending without a license were all charges that he was allowing to push aside due to her unforeseen arrival. They didn't want to cause any more problems until they were settled. Not to mention the fact an enraged Endeavor might have just burnt her to a crisp if she ran into him on the street again. Second, there was getting into the car. Not that she had never been inside of a moving metal vehicle before. In fact, she had been in multiple different kind of machines in the last year. And yet getting into this small Shuzuka, whatever they called it, and its open windows exposing her to everything outside just felt odd. And she had to put this strange belt over her body, locking her in place and rubbing against her neck irritated her. And then third was Tensei's mother. Oh, this is going to be so fun. I have always had to shop for 2 boys. I always wanted to take a girl to get new outfits. Tensei just rubbed his temple as he sat next to his mother while she drove them down the road. He didn't want to take Katara outside, but he knew if he tried to dissuade her, she would have got suspicious. All he could do was go along with the 2 of them and keep an eye on her. So, there are several places I know you must go to if you need a new wardrobe set. Madoka continued on her excited tangent as merged down the road. We need shirts, obviously for day-to-day use. Then shoes. And dresses. Oh, a beautiful blue one for you. Oh, I know the perfect store. And then... Ooh, I think I'll get just new things. Katara attempted to calm down the eccentric woman in the front. But she obviously had other plans. Oh darling, please. You are to experience a new place from your village. Yes, then you will experience what we have to offer. There is a wonderful store that has great jackets and wondrous designs you will adore. The excited mom continued as Katara shook her head. She glanced outside the window as she took in the many passing buildings. Now that it was the day, everything looked so different to her from before. The dazzling lights from the night were gone, leaving her to take in the structures for what they were. She was also shocked to see it was winter here, and yet where she came from it was summer. Something to do with how I got here, she said quietly. She stared at the people passing by, all of them so different from everyone else. Her mind began imagining new powers that some of them may have had. She saw a man with a bush for a head. Did he grow leaves or fruit? Quirks are something else, she whispered under her breath. And here we are, Madoka cheered as she pulled into the desired parking lot. Katara snapped out of her thoughts as she looked ahead to see an immense shopping center spreading out across the size of what she guessed was the entire Northern Water Tribe. She sat in awe at the sheer mass of the place, not believing there was a way this place simply sold things. This is where you go shopping. How is one store this big? Oh no, Madoka giggled at her question. There are many stores here in this mall? Come on, let's get to it. She quickly unbuckled and seemingly danced her way out of the car, leaving the other 2 in awkward silence. Twiddling her thumbs, Katara looked to her host and blew out her mouth. Suo, we should get out now, right? Tensei sighed and rubbed his forehead. Yes, let's do this. Just, don't go wandering off, promise? Yes, I promise. Nodding, both got out of the car and caught up to the giddy mother walking up the steps. Once up the stairs, Katara's mouth nearly dropped to the floor when her eyes set sight on the monstrous mall. Multiple floors stacked on top of each other, each one packed with stores of every variety of things she could imagine. Along with the immense number of stores were the droves of people walking through the center. It felt like Ba Sing Se all over again for the young waterbender. This place is enormous. This is where all of your stores are? Tensei gave a small shrug. Well, for this mall, yes. Her eyes bugged out of her head hearing that. How many malls do you have, hey? Come on, miss, so much to do today. Madoka excitingly pulled Katara by her wrist towards the first stop on her list. Let's start with the basics. As she was tugged along, Katara simply moaned and let the woman lead her. Well, it can't be that bad, can't it? So, how do you like them? Madoka wiggled back and forth in anticipation as she waited for the young girl outside the changing room. Ooh, I'm not sure. It seems fitting. Katara awkwardly answered from behind the door. Oh, come out, let me see. The happy mother watched as the door opened up and revealed the waterbender, earning an exasperated gasp from the blue-haired woman. Oh, my gosh, you are gorgeous. Katara was in a blue crop top revealing the lower half of her tanned abs. She wasn't bothered by that part, but felt covered and yet very exposed with the tight leggings she had on. This goes under other things, right? Well, you can, yes, but many wear just those, and you have the shape to show off, darling. The giddy mother gave a big wink to her. Just these? Katara turned to the side and felt her face burn red when she saw every curve of her lower half in the mirror. Yeah, that is not happening. You sure these are what people wear here? Katara questioned as she eyed the giant round sun hat in her hands. She placed it on top of her head and frowned when the large bill drooped in front of her face. Well, this is for special occasions. Special for what? Being blind? Her mind suddenly smacked herself. Sorry, Toph. Oh, those are perfect for you. Trying to stand up in the skinny stilettos was already hard enough for Katara, but moving in them were another story. These are, whoa, her ankles wobbled between steps as she tried to balance on the tiny spike under her heel. How are people supposed to Snap. Madoka winced as she watched the girl fall sideways and the bottom of the shoe break off. Yeah, maybe a shorter size for your first time. She quickly glanced around seeing they weren't being watched. Just put those away quickly and let's hit another store. After nearly 3 hours of shopping, Katara had to admit she was actually enjoying herself more than she expected. She was now wearing a gray t-shirt and blue pants along with new footwear. Sure, there were stores she wished she could have skipped. She was never a fan of fancy shoes, but she was blown away by some of the things that were here. Sure, the basics like shirts and shorts were picked out, along with other things she was familiar with like sandals for basic use around when she was relaxing. But there were several things that she discovered that blew her mind. The first thing were the type of pants called jeans. The strange material seemed like it would be rough to her legs, but they were surprisingly comfortable once they hugged her skin. She wanted only one, but her host was adamant that she grabbed others to change colors. Blue, of course, but then black and tan to go with other shirts she bought. She wasn't too big of a fan of the short skirts or leggings, but of course Madoka had to grab a few of each for her. Another thing she was taken back by were the strange shoes in this world called sneakers. The odd, rubbery shoes were incredibly soft and gave amazing cushion to her soles that it felt like she was walking on a pillow. She loved one of these green pairs she found so much, she almost didn't want to take them off out of the store. She then figured she was already in new clothes, so she decided why not wear new shoes to go with them too. Wearing them out, along with the 2 other pairs chosen, she assumed they were done with their day. Looking down, Katara now counted 4 bags in her hands as they walked through the center of the mall. Wow, I didn't realize how many things we got. I know, isn't this great? Madoka cheered as she wiggled in glee. After shopping for Tensei and Tenya for so long, I never knew helping a young girl shop would be so fun. Katara suddenly remembered the one she originally came with, turning around to see Tensei carrying most of the shopping bags and boxes with a giant frown on his face. Evidently being the pack mule for the ladies wasn't what he thought fun was. Oh yes, jolly fun time, he sighed as he trotted along. Seeing him flustered made Katara giggle. She couldn't believe the situation she had found herself in. Just the night before she was thrown into this strange world with nothing but the clothes on her back and no place to go. And now, she was here with several new people offering her everything she needed and more. There was no way to describe how much this meant to her, the happy feelings it brought up inside her chest. She didn't even realize the haziness forming in her vision. Katara? Huh? What? She snapped out of her thoughts to Tensei's voice and noticed both him and his mother staring at her. What's wrong? Well, we should be asking you that, he asked with a hint of worry. Before she could say anything, the feeling of a tear rolling down her cheek gave her the answer she was looking for. She reached up and wiped away the wet streaks from her face and smiled. I'm all right. It's just I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you are doing for me. You are giving me much more than I need. Madoka clenched her chest hearing that. Awa, sweetie, you don't need to feel bad. This is the least we can do to help you. Yes, but I feel really bad. I promise I can pay you back for this stuff and... You won't be needing to do that? Tensei walked up to her, his face warm and caring. I told you I'd help you with your situation, and I am happy to do this for you. You don't need to pay a thing right now. Drying the rest of her face off, Katara nodded to both of them and smiled. Happy with what she had done, Madoka decided to call their shopping spree. Well, perhaps that is good for your first mall trip. Perhaps we could head back and get home now. Katara gave a small nod in approval as Tensei adjusted his many boxes he carried. Thank God, Mom's finally done shopping, he yelled internally. The car ride home was surprisingly quiet compared to the drive over. Katara stared out to the blue sky as they cruised down the road. Her mind drifted calmly as she listened to the music that came out of the doors around her. She had no idea how it worked, but somehow there was music being played with no band around, and yet it sounded right there. The guitar strings plucked reverberated around her, almost as if the band was directly in front of her. She would eventually ask what this was, but at the moment it felt good to just relax and listen. After they pulled into the driveway, the trio unloaded the bags and boxes of clothes and carried them up the steps. After getting them into the house, they walking them to Tensei's place. They dropped them all off into her room. As they walked back towards the car for the remaining bags, Katara's eyes wandered into one of the rooms she had passed the night before. She couldn't help but stare inside at the strange metal room. Her legs seemed to move on their own as she was drawn into it before a hand fell onto her shoulder, making her gasp. She looked up and saw Tensei standing behind her. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be going into other rooms without your permission. To her surprise, he just looked down to her. So you took notice of this room, huh? She was confused by his statement as he walked by her into the strange room, signaling her to follow. She was hesitant at first, but decided to stay with him and entered. The entire room was a light blue color, but almost entirely made of metal. Several workbenches were lined against the sides of the wall, littered with pieces of metal fragments ranging in all shapes and sizes. And on one of the tables she noticed something very familiar to her from the night before, walking up to it and staring intensely at it. Is that your armor? Tensei nodded and walked over to the disassembled set of pieces set in front of the waterbender. I needed a few adjustments to the joints in the shoulders, so I take it here. This is where the family keeps their hero costumes. Katara couldn't help but notice several large patch spots under the chest portion where the ribs sit. She reached out and ran her hand over the area, feeling where there were deep gashes from before. So something nearly cut through, didn't it? Tensei raised an eyebrow in surprise at her guess. Yeah, a villain with a scythe quirk almost got to the skin a year back. How could you tell? I've seen my share of repaired armor in the past. He couldn't help but get a small shiver when she responded so naturally with that statement. Last night she had told him about her home being ravaged by war. Judging by how easily she came to that assumption meant she must have been telling the truth. Before he could say anything, she continued. So your job is to go out and save people from others who try to hurt others, right? She asked, the tone in her voice different from before. Not every time, but there are times when there are people who want to hurt others using their quirks. That is why there are those like me who do what they can to help others. Those are heroes. Katara took her hand off the armor and looked down to her own hand, thinking back to what he told her the night before. You said what I did last night when I tried to save that boy, that I reminded you of what a real hero would do. But I just did what was right. You seem to have a good heart, and I respect that. But unfortunately here, the government requires those who want to use their powers to get a license to use them for use against others. He picked up his helmet and brushed off the dust. That is why the police chief was so upset when you used your ability in the public like that. She clenched her fist and remembered the many times she saw how the Fire Nation would restrict the bending of the villages they conquered. While this place obviously was not as bad, she felt annoyed that people didn't have the freedom to defend themselves if they needed to. She almost felt responsible wanting to be there to help others if she could. "Hello, I'm home." The two of them in the workshop turned to see Tenya standing in the doorway in his gray school uniform. Tensei raised an eyebrow in confusion. "Tenya, why are you back from school?" The school had a water break in the main building, so classes were cancelled for the day. Tenya responded with his usual stiff movements. He noticed Katara standing there. "Oh, Katara, hello, I see you here with my brother as well." Katara gave a nod his direction. "Yes, him and your mother took me to the mall to get clothes since I lost my other ones." "This lie is coming pretty natural," she mumbled internally. "Well, that is wondrous you have new things now. I am pleased that they helped you," Tenya happily exclaimed and gave a small bow. "Well, I shall leave you and cease my disturbance to finish my studying." Tensei suddenly came up with an idea and grinned. "Hey Tenya, how about you take Katara with you and let her study as well?" "Huh?" Katara looked up to him in confusion. "Study?" "Brother, that is a wonderful idea," Tenya answered excitingly. "You said you wanted to learn about Japan, and I would be honored to help you study new things." At first Katara was very hesitant at the offer, but realized if she was to learn anything of this place, help would be amazing. Trying to read and figure everything out herself was an option, but would probably take so much longer than having someone to be her teacher. Perhaps this was actually a great idea. "That would be amazing, thank you," she said with a large smile. "Excellent, if you would like, we can go and study by the pool. Calm sounds of water always helps with the mind." "Pool?" Katara asked before she frowned, realizing why their mom kept insisting they go to the swimwear store. As they walked out of the room together, Tensei couldn't help but smile. He walked over to the printer on the desk and lifted up the 2 sheets he made earlier. "Tenya, you already have your mind set on what you want to do and who you will become." He paused as he read the UA High School application for his brother before flipping to the second page, another application sheet that had a blank name spot. "As for you Katara, I can see you have interest and the drive to do what is right. I however won't say anything. If you want to become a hero, you must make that choice yourself." Through the back hall of the house, Katara stared at the large indoor pool with a small sparkle in her eye. She just felt good having a large source of water close by as she sat at the patio set near the edge. She looked over to Ida as he quickly set his books on the table, giggling as he already had a giant grin on his face. "So Katara, today I am learning the fundamentals of economics of Japanese history. I shall happily help you get this subject figured out." "Ooh, sure. Sounds fun," she answered with sarcasm as she grabbed the sheet Ida handed her. While she didn't understand a word about what he was studying, she knew she would have to learn anything and everything she could about this place. She smiled and grabbed the pen and leaned down towards the page in front of her. "Let's do this." "Studying sucks," Katara mumbled as she fell onto her bed late that evening. Her brain felt like it was pulsing in her head from the overload of information she was trying to cram into one day. Not to mention Tenya was not a slow teacher for her. "He acts like this stuff is as basic as breathing." She chuckled to herself and rubbed her forehead. She looked out the window to the dark sky, noting how the sun had already been down for several hours. After Tenya said he needed to go to sleep for school the next day, she ran into his parents who were going out for a date together. Tensei also mentioned that he was going to be working in the office doing work the rest of the night. She figured she would just go back to the room and try to sleep. On the bed, however, her mind was racing so fast there was no way she was going to be able to relax for some time. "And now I'm here alone and can't sleep," she sighed to herself as she sat back up. She needed to do something relaxing to calm her mind, something she was more comfortable with than anything at the moment. She needed water. Thinking back to earlier, she walked out of her room and looked over and noticed Tensei deep in thought on his desk. His face was buried in the paperwork stacked on top, not noticing her peeking inside. Not wanting to bother him, Katara made her way to the entry door and silently pushed it open. She closed it behind her and walked through the empty home back towards where she was earlier. Once inside the pool room, she gave a small smile at the sight of the dark water sitting still in front of her. The light from the moon illuminated the surface, casting beautiful reflections across the ceiling of the dark room. Katara took her shoes off and sat on the edge of the water, letting her feet fall into the refreshing pool. Just 3 seconds in and her mind already ceased its throbbing sensation she had been experiencing. Now I would just sleep in here if I could, she chuckled to herself. She kicked her feet several times, letting the water splash out and make little waves. Her hand reached out and bended up a small ball of water. The wet orb gently spun in the air above her fingers, bringing a smile to Katara's face. Then, her mind clicked again. If I am here in the place, I do need a place to practice my bending, she said as she stood up. Knowing she was alone at the moment, she knew it was the perfect time to do this. She reached her foot onto the water surface, but it didn't sink through. Instead, the water pushed back up against her to support her weight. She slowly walked out the pool's rippling surface until she was in the center. She stood still for several seconds, taking a deep breath before raising her hands from her sides and pulling up 2 streams of water with her. Taking slow spins, she pulled the water around her body like 2 flowing paper streamers, not letting a single drop fall out of place. The columns of liquid crawled up her arms and slowly encased her shoulders as well, almost as if a large serpent sat on top of her body. She lowered her arms along with what she bended, the water reaching down and lifting herself above the surface. She hovered there for a few moments as her eyes stared at the ceiling, her mind finally at ease from before. Now she had truly made her decision. She would continue to practice her bending here when she could, and she would learn the new ways of this world from her new friends here. From here on out, this was her new starting line. Cold. Wind. Ice. She could feel them all. The white snow blanketed the ground everywhere around her, slowly turning a dirty gray. The chunks of soot fell from above, staining the ground. Fire flew through the sky, scorching the top of the southern village huts. A single young girl ran through the icy snow as she raced back home. "Mom, Mom, where are you?" Katara weaved her way through the panicked villagers as they ran in all directions. The warriors ran past her to engage the attackers while the others tried to find cover where they could. She, however, was trying to get back to her home to find who she was looking for. "Mom, Mom." She saw her hut in sight. There was something else that sent a cold shiver up her body. Scorch marks on the blanket covering the entrance inside. Her heart racing, she rushed forward and pulled back the cover. She did find her mother, but she was not alone. She looked up into the cold eyes of a man standing over her. "Mom. Mom." Katara burst up from her bed, panting as her heart raced inside her chest. She gripped her forehead in fear as she tried to calm her nerves. Even though the memory she experienced was from so many years ago, it still managed to surface from time to time. She was just grateful that it stopped before it got any further. After a few moments, her breathing finally began to slow, taking in deep inhales to relax her tense body. "It's just a memory," she whispered between breaths. "Just a dream." Her eyes glanced over to the new clock she received by her bed, seeing it was already after 8. She reached down and grimaced at the shirt she was wearing, now damp from the nightmare she endured. Mumbling to herself, she crawled out of bed and looked around her room. The once barren walls were now lined with different posters of the ocean and of Mount Fuji. Her body slowly moved over to the mirror above her dresser as she stared at herself for some time, her hand coming up to her mother's necklace that she wore. She ran her finger across the gem as her eyes looked up and down herself. Seeing that pendant was the only thing she had on that even reminded her of her old life. How time has changed, huh? It had been just over 2 months since she had suddenly appeared in Japan. 2 months since her life got flipped upside down. She had spent 6 months of her life battling across the world she knew, fighting off firebenders and creatures most only dreamed of. From the South Pole to the North, from Ba Sing Sea to the Fire Nation capital, the entire world she had gone across in that matter of time. And now, she had spent what felt like just as much time in one place completely new to her. And in terms of action, the most she had was all in the first night of her arrival. Now, her days of fighting were over and replaced with one that she never expected. Studying. She couldn't help but laugh at herself. I didn't ever think books would be my thing I'd be focused most on. After changing her clothes, she walked out of her bedroom to the living room and looked around for her host. After a few moments she realized that Tensei was already gone, something she had become used to after a while. Already to the office today, she whispered to herself and sat down on the couch. She rubbed her forehead and sighed, reaching down and grabbing the remote next to her and flipping on the television. Of all the things she had discovered over the last few months, this was perhaps the oddest and yet the coolest thing yet. Although her first time trying it out, let's just say it wasn't the best. Tensei ran into the room as he heard her scream. What's wrong? Katara was huddled behind the couch as she hid from the TV. What is going there? The monsters are eating people. Tensei looked up to the screen and sighed in relief. Oh no, don't worry. It's just a movie. It's not real. What? How? It is right there. It is like a play they make for others to enjoy. She peeked around the couch to look at the bright screen again before yelping and hiding back behind. What kind of play is this? It's horrible. Come on, it's Jurassic Park. That's like my favorite movie. Katara frowned at herself, thinking how ridiculous she must have looked to him that day. After several explanations, she began to understand that people watch things on here like how they went to plays to enjoy a story. Once she finally could enjoy it normally, she probably didn't leave the couch for 3 days burning through film after film. The shock and enjoyment she felt watching these new things kept her so invested she couldn't stop. After a few days, though, her head began to actually become numb from staring so long at the bright colors. Realizing she couldn't do that, she tried limiting herself to 1 or 2 films a day. As she flipped the channels, she decided to skip a movie and see what was actually going on around the country. She was taught there were real stories, so the first 2 months it took multiple attempts to remember which channels showed just movies and which were real. She stopped when she came across the news reporting on a building burning in South Kyushu. Her body tensed up when she could see multiple people still stuck inside the upper floors, unable to get out. As you can see, the fires have spread all throughout the lower floors of the office building, blocking off all exit routes. The news reporter yelled out over the sirens screeching past her in the background. If the fire department can't get the flames out fast enough, I don't know how long the people will last inside. Katara clenched her fists as she watched helplessly as the flames crept higher and higher, smoke beginning to block out the view of the struggling people from above. They have to get the fire out soon, or the smoke will get to them first. She yelled to herself as she scooted closer. She watched in frustration as the fire trucks began spraying their hoses at the inferno, but she got even more mad when she watched the water splashing uselessly off the collapsed metal beams blocking most of the access points to the building. They are wasting all of that water. They need to, she huffed out when she clutched her knees. If I were there, I could control the water to flow inside of there. Her eyes suddenly caught a blur shoot off through the frame behind the reporter, a gust of wind whipping by her and almost knocking her off balance. Katara watched intently as the newswoman caught herself and looked back up. Wait, it seems someone is. Look, there he is. Katara stared as the camera turned to see multiple people being yanked out of the building by what looked like tiny, red feathers. Each small item carried an individual by their clothes out from the inferno down towards the street. The feathers all rushed back out of frame, the camera following them until they came upon a young blonde man in a tan jacket and red wings. In his arms he also held 2 other people as his wings slowed his descent. The 15-year-old waterbender could not help but be amazed as she listened to the reporter gasp in shock. Amazing. The number 3 hero Hawks came in just the nick of time to save everyone instantly. He got all the civilians out of harm's way before there were any casualties. Watching the TV, Katara could hear the cheers of people as they all surrounded the young hero. She couldn't help but smile herself as the pro dropped the people down and greeted all the fans rushing up to him. I haven't seen him much, but he has a pretty unique power, she whispered to herself. The sudden knock on the door caught her attention and made her turn around. Just a second, she yelled out as she made her way over and opened it up, raising her eyebrow to what was in front of her. Ida, what are you wearing? Tenya Ida was standing there in a gray jacket and what appeared to be a pointy green hat with a white ball on the end. Why, this is a spring hat, of course. It is February 21st, meaning winter is almost over and spring has come our way. She smirked at him and raised an eyebrow. Well, you sure are excited for the change of seasons, I see. It is such an important day, Ida responded with his occasional air chop. I am at odds how you have never heard of this from where you came from. Katara sighed and forced a fake chuckle. Yeah, we were an isolated village. Yeah, close enough, she mumbled internally. Well, I want to make sure that you enjoy your first holiday change like the way we all do. Ida stood proud and pointed to his chest. I shall take you to the spring parade this evening. Hearing that actually did make her excited. A parade? Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. What time is it at? It starts at 5, but I was curious if you wanted to join me at our family's training facility to do some quirk training before. Her ears lit up hearing him say that. Your training facility? I've heard your brother mention it several times, but I've never seen it myself. Well, perhaps he was waiting to show you after he knew you could be trusted there. The sudden seriousness in his voice caught Katara's attention. She was about to question what he meant, but figured it would be better to avoid it. Yeah, maybe he has been busy, so he hasn't gotten to it yet. It is all right. Let us head out now. We can get food on the way. Okay, I have to say, burgers may be my favorite thing now. Katara happily enjoyed her greasy meal as she walked down the road through the downtown of Tokyo, the early weekend morning still void of most people. Ida eyed her odd choice as he sipped his hot chocolate. I still am shocked how you enjoy these kinds of meals so early in the morning. It is completely out of the norm. Hey, I never got to have things like this growing up. I'm going to enjoy it now. She chuckled before taking another bite. She looked up as a light morning mist fell on the two of them. While she wore a light blue jacket, she really enjoyed the cool weather. It wasn't snow, but anything that reminded her of her home was a welcoming feeling she would take as much as she could. Her mind began to think back of the village she came from before Ada interrupted her thoughts. So, have your lessons paid off now? I have seen great improvements with you over these months. She sighed and lowered her food. They have been good, but I feel like I need a break at the moment. What do you mean? These questions are imperative to your studies. I know, but how should I say this? Quite difficult. He turned to her and chuckled. They aren't that difficult. She raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? Tenya furiously chopped the air as he lectured his struggling student. Come on, Katara. The square root of 4,550 is a clearly obvious answer. I can barely multiply 10 times 10. How am I supposed to get this? Don't be a quitter. This is not rocket science. She angrily reached up and grabbed her hair. What the heck is a rocket? Oh, do not be dramatic. That was in the beginning. He grinned as they turned right down the road. Katara couldn't help but chuckle at his determination to teach her everything. Sure, she was never the best, granted she never went to a day of school in her life, but even she was surprised how quickly she picked it up. Although she knew there was so much more to figure out than what she already had learned. As they neared the facility, Ida continued on with his questions. So how was your test from last night? Did you finish it? She forced out a fake chuckle and rubbed her head. Well, I actually didn't take it yet. I wasn't feeling the best last night. Ida took another sip and looked forward. Another late-night training session? Katara froze in her steps at his answer. Wait, when did? I was up last night as well. Couldn't sleep. Ida glanced over to her and watched her shocked reaction. Do you do that often? On the spot now, Katara slowly nodded. Yeah, I do it every few days. I didn't want to be rude to your family by using their pool as a training spot, but I just wanted to continue practicing with my quirk. It is not rude at all. If you simply asked, they would happily let you do that. He sighed and dropped his empty cup into a nearby trash can. It's like you don't want to be honest with us. Now this time Katara definitely noticed the undertone he slipped into his statement there, causing her to glare his direction. What's that supposed to mean? I mean, like, from where you really come from. His question sent a cold chill up Katara's spine when he said that. Her feet froze in place as sweat started to drip down her forehead. What do you mean? Ida sighed and stopped walking as well. I do not want to pry into your personal life. But I find it strange you have not told the truth about where you come from. He turned and looked her in the eye. I tried asking Tensei, but he said that your situation was complicated. Katara shifted in her spot, unsure what to say as he questioned her. How did you find out? Well, mother and father have not questioned anything, but I had a strange feeling after some of our study sessions. You say you don't have cars, but you recognize tanks. You say you don't have technology like we do, and yet you know what trains are. Even people who don't follow heroes know who All Might is, and yet you didn't even recognize his name when I mentioned him one day. But I told you that my village is. I trust my brother if he chose to let you come here, and I can tell you are a very genuine person. Ida's brow softened as he spoke to her. I have truly come to call you a friend of mine over the last few months, and I feel terrible for putting you on the spot. So why the hell are you? Katara grumbled internally. But Ida stood up straight and marched over to her. As someone who lives with my family, I would feel much more comfortable if we were honest with each other. Now that she felt like she was cornered, Katara felt her nerves tensing up again. Other than the occasional question about how her culture was different, Tensei never pushed her to reveal more of her past. He always told her he would wait until she was ready. There were many things that even he didn't know, including some of the different abilities her bending could be used for. At this point, however, was keeping everything a secret even worth it anymore? Seeing her turmoil over discussing this situation, Ida realized he may have been pushing too much. I'm sorry. If there are things that you experienced at home as to why you came here, I shouldn't have tried to make you. My mother was killed when I was little. Ida's heart skipped a beat when he heard that, but before he could respond, she continued. My village had been raided for years, and when I was a little girl they came again. It happened so fast, and after I ran to my father for help it was too late. Katara reached down and showed him the necklace she wore. This is the last thing I have of her. That's why I keep this close, so that I will never forget her. While he knew she wasn't telling the full story, Ida had no idea that she had dealt with something to this extent. He immediately regretted asking her now. I am deeply sorry for making you bring this up. I shall not make you have to. It's all right. It's not your fault. Katara reached up and grabbed his shoulder. You were concerned about who I was, and I was not being forward with you. It's not something I really enjoy talking about, that's why. Ida let out a small breath and smiled. Well, I should be the one apologizing still. If you weren't ready to talk, I should respect your privacy. I shall wait until you are ready to talk about it. As he turned and continued on the sidewalk, Katara still felt guilty that she hadn't told the whole truth to her new hosts. Tensei knew she wasn't from this world, but she still hadn't told him some of the things that she had experienced during the war. And if she was stuck here, should she, or would it just make it more confusing? She shook her head and followed him down the road, throwing her wrapper away in a nearby trash can. The two walked in silence for a few minutes, not knowing what to say after the somewhat awkward moment. They didn't have to worry about breaking the silence, however, for something else would do that for them. Boom! The windows to their right suddenly burst out as 4 men jumped through the glass. Both Katara and Ida fell back in shock as the group of thugs ran down the road carrying bags of cash. Let's go, boys, before some pros show up, one of the guys in the back yelled as he chased after the others. Katara felt her anger rise as she watched the group run off. Criminal trash. Let's stop them. Before she could move, however, Ida's arm blocked her path. What are you doing? Katara, you can't just engage them. You are not allowed to use your quirks on others, he exclaimed. We shall alert the authorities. She sneered, hearing that from him. So I'm supposed to just let them get away? Why do I need permission to do what is right? I know this is frustrating, but you will be in trouble if... Help! Please stop! They both froze to the ear-piercing scream and turned to see a woman exit the robbed store. The distraught woman was crying and running after the fleeing criminals. Please don't hurt him. Him? Katara's heart began beating faster as she turned back to the criminals, and felt her blood run cold when the leader turned around. No. The head of the group had a small child in his arms, keeping his crab-clawed hands on the boy's trembling body. He looked around to all the bystanders, showing off his prize. Any of you heroes around here try and come near us, the kid gets it. As the criminals took off down the road again, Katara couldn't stand there anymore. Her anger was past control, and she tried to run but was held back. Ida, let me go. Katara, you can't. If you get close, they may hurt the child, so you need to let the pros come and... No, she glared up to him and grabbed his wrist. I am not standing by when someone needs help. She shoved him out of the way and sprinted down the road after the 4 villains. Even with her friend calling to her, she shut him out and focused forward. I am not going to be a bystander. As the gang rounded a corner ahead, Katara began gathering the heavy moisture in the air and forming several small balls of water around her. When she had a decent amount built up, she launched to forward and latched onto the feet of the straggling thief. What is thy? His voice was cut off by a stream of water engulfing his head and throwing him into the nearby wall. Seeing him knocked out, Katara gathered the water back up and rounded the corner after the others, leading to a small alleyway. She ran down and saw the remaining 3 sprinting down the dirty road. Hey, let him go. The group stopped and turned to the voice behind. When they saw their pursuer, the smaller one burst out laughing. Well, isn't this cute, a little wannabe hero? Yeah, she looks really dangerous, doesn't she? The other laughed as his hand suddenly morphed into a small knife. Katara looked between the 2 of them, her eyes meeting the scared child's. It's okay. You'll be okay. I promise. The young boy nodded slowly, but gasped when the clawed hand reached across his neck. Katara clenched her teeth and stepped forward. You are sick using a kid as a hostage. Well, you should have stayed back like a good little girl, the man sneered at her, eyeing the water floating around her. You got my cousin back there, so I won't be set with just giving this boy up. The other 2 criminals suddenly noticed they were down a man, their smiles replaced with confusion. Wait, this kid took out Oji? Yes, she did, and she will pay for that. His claws tightened, eliciting a gasp from the child. Katara raised her hand in fear he could tighten. Stop, you don't need to do this. Oh, I don't. I warned you people not to interfere, and you had to stick your nose in my bus og. A sudden ice spike pierced his arm just above his claws, faltering his grip and the boy dropping to the ground. Katara waved her arms around and formed several more behind her body. Get out of here, run! You stupid bitch! The angered man ripped the ice spike out of his arm. I'm going to shove this ice up your ass when I'm through with you. You will regret trying hurt that kid, I'll make sure. A white blur rushed past Katara's body fast enough to almost pull her off the ground. She gasped as she dropped her water to balance herself from falling over. She could hear sudden yelps and a mixture of thuds and crashes from the front. Then everything went silent. She opened her eyes again to see what caused the sudden gust, but then felt her heart catch in her throat. It's you. Standing there was Tensei in his ingenium costume, his body above the 3 criminals, all unconscious on the ground now. Smoke trailed out of the exhaust pipes from his arms, sizzling against the moist air. To top off the image, the young boy was cradled in his arms, clutching onto the armored hero and smiling. Katara had to admit she was in amazement. She felt she could have taken on the gang herself, but to see how he took them out in a mere instant was beyond impressive. Now she could see why Tenya looked up to him so much. Wow, that was amazing, Katara said as she watched him lower the boy to the ground. She smiled and walked towards him as he reached up to remove his helmet. You took them out so fast. I don't know if I could have. Her words fell silent when she saw the face underneath. One of pure anger. Katara, you get back to the house. Now. The furious tone in his voice caught Katara completely off guard. She stepped back as he stomped towards her. What? I just helped stop those guys. If I didn't slow them down, they could have. You have no right to get involved in anything like this, he yelled at her. Now get back home. Now. The waterbender was frozen in shock and fright as his voice reached a tempo she hadn't heard from him before. But I had to. He walked back and grabbed the boy by his hand and pulled him through the alleyway past her. He huffed past her and shot her a sharp glare. I'll be there soon to talk. Alone in the living room for 30 minutes, Katara sat cross-armed on the couch. Her thumbs rubbed against her forearms in anxiousness to what was coming her way. She huffed out in a mix of fear and frustration to Tensei coming off on her. I did the right thing, though, she muttered as she shifted uncomfortably. I had to do something. The door coming into the guest home suddenly burst open, causing her a startle. Her eyes met with an angered Tensei coming in and slamming the door behind him. He walked over to the counter and dropped his helmet on the top, resting his hands next to it. For what felt like several minutes, he kept his back towards her, staring at the wall behind the sink. Katara could see him taking deep breaths to calm his temper, but how much it was working was the real question. Before she could say anything, he was the one to break the silence. I wrote in the report that I engaged the group on my own. I left you out of it. Ida, please listen to me. Katara stood up and walked towards him. Before you say anything, I need you to understand. Understand what? Tensei clenched his fists as he stared forward. Tenya called me. Luckily, I was still nearby when I answered, or I wouldn't have got there in time. I am grateful for helping me, I am. Katara stopped by his side and placed her hand next to his. I had it under control. I wasn't going to let them hurt. And what right did you have to do that? He turned and stood over her, his harsh stare beaming down. What would have happened if that kid got hurt, or worse? How do you think that would have turned out for you? I wasn't going to let that happen. I had that situation under control. And why did you get involved in that situation? He stepped closer and held his finger in the air. The one rule I told you that you cannot forget. You cannot use your quirk on others if you do not have the authority to do it. Hearing that made Katara's blood boil, the stern girl glaring back at him now. So I was supposed to wait for someone else to come and stop them. I was there, so I did what was right. What you think was right is not what was to be done. There are laws that forbid people from doing things like that. The chief made that very clear when he put you in my service, and he warned you not to step out of line. Both of us can be in real trouble if you are caught doing that. And that means I can't help him. That kid needed someone to save him, so I got involved. Katara stepped forward, standing face to face with the pro-hero. I know what was said, but I couldn't just sit there. What you wanted to do and what you can't do are different things. You can't do that and then. No, I won't sit by anymore when others need my help. Katara held her ground, her own anger spilling out. This whole time here I've been told follow the rules, but I will help those who need it, so show me how to. Tensei was about to counter what she said, but the last sentence caught his attention. What do you mean show me? Katara took a deep breath and looked him in the eyes. I will help people, so I need you to show me how to be a hero. The two of them stared each other down for the next minute, neither knowing who was going to break first. Katara's stern glare looked into Tensei's eyes intently, trying to see what he was thinking. Her hard look changed, however, when she heard him start chuckling. What's so funny? Tensei's mouth slowly formed into a smile as he leaned back from her. Now that is what I've been waiting to hear. Huh? Katara was perplexed by his sudden change in demeanor, watching him turn and head into his office. Did you just get into a weird work mood? Not responding, Tensei shuffled through the pages on his desk before he came to the one he was looking for. Smiling, he walked back over and held the sheet out for her. I sent this in back when you first came here, but would only give final confirmation to them once you made the choice yourself. Confused, Katara grabbed the page from him and glanced over it, before almost dropping it in utter shock. This is UAHI application for. She looked back up to him, feeling her heart racing inside her chest. Katara. Smiling at her, Tensei crossed his arms and leaned against the nearby table. I knew eventually you would want to do this. I could tell by your heart. I also know you probably will jump into more situations down the line, so you may as well get the training you will need. She sat silent as she looked back to the paper, her eyes catching something she didn't notice before. My name is Kairi Katara. She looked at him in confusion, but he simply smiled at her. It would be odd if you didn't have more than just Katara, so I made that your family name since everyone will call you that anyway. And you should get used to that first name as well. He put his hands on his hips and stood back. The entrance exam is next week. Today was the day. It didn't even feel real, but it was. Both Katara and Tenya sat together on the crowded train as they made their way towards their destination. He decided to wear his middle school uniform to the exams, while she had gone with a small jacket and matching gray shirt and pants. She didn't have a fancy set of clothes yet, and didn't bother about trying to get some for this. Also, she had decided to go back to her older hairstyle by making a single long braid and of course her 2 front hanging loops. If she was going to school, may as well have a set look to go with it, and would have to remember that new name Tensei had given her to apply here. While she was very nervous about this whole scenario, she glanced over and saw a large smile across his face. "You don't seem scared of this at all." "Of course, this is the day I have been waiting for my entire life," Ida exclaimed in enthusiasm. "Every upcoming hero's dream is to go to UA." "Yeah, I've been told." She chuckled and looked out the window, seeing the next station approaching rapidly. "Looks like we are almost here already." "Yes, it is very convenient that my family lives so close to the school. Reaching here will be very fast after we enroll." "Aren't you forgetting we have to pass before we are enrolled there?" She raised an eyebrow to his eagerness. "Should be thinking of a backup plan ahead just in case." He simply chopped a few times as he responded. "You should not doubt yourself, Katara. With us studying so diligently and our quirks, we shall make it in no problem." "Oh yeah, so easy," she rolled her eyes. "I can barely keep up with you in studies, and now this test is for real. The written part has little impact if you do well in the practical portion." He paused as the train came to a stop and the doors opened. "I shall continue on the way there. We must not dawdle and cost precious time." Katara frowned at the way he acted on a time schedule, getting up and following him out and down the stairs. She slipped on the small backpack she was given, quite surprised how comfortable the straps were compared to the ones she had before. Her eyes noticed there were a large number of kids around their age as well, all of them most likely going to the same place they were. And she noticed nearly all of them were in some sort of uniform. Great, now I do feel out of place. As I was saying earlier, Ida brought out the entrance exam sheet. This document reveals the practical portion is worth 80% of what the examinees are looking at. So I have great confidence you will do fine. She gave him a small smile at his compliment. "Thanks, I'll do my best to get in." She looked up to the sky and took a deep breath. "If this is what I have to do to help people, then I have to do this." After a few minutes the two of them came upon the grand entrance to the high school. Katara sat in awe to the large gates and wall that surrounded the giant structure in the center. It looked more like a fortress than any school she had ever seen before. Although after seeing the shopping centers in this world, she shouldn't have expected anything less than that. They passed through the entrance plaza and made their way inside the long hallway of the school. Signs all throughout were leading them along with all the other kids to an enormous arena-like room. Hundreds of other teenagers already in their seats. "Wow, there are so many here," Katara whispered as she followed her friend down the steps. Her eyes went back and forth among the many different kinds of people were all around her. A large majority of them simply looked like normal people, but there were other ones that definitely stood out, like the pink, fuzzy girl that bounded happily to her seat. There was another girl with long flowing vines from her head, and a giant boy who had multiple webbed arms coming out of his body. This could be pretty interesting. She mumbled to herself while walking down one of the aisles and sat next to Ida. "Well, here we are now." "Yes, this is the time we have waited for," Ida smiled and saluted himself. "Now is the time I bring honor to the Ida family name." Katara sweat dropped at his eagerness. Someone is for sure ready for this. The lights suddenly dimmed all around before the front stage was lit up. The bright screen in the back was illuminated in blue and the large gold UA symbol. And over the speakers, a loud voice suddenly rang through the room. "What's up, UA candidates? Thanks for tuning in to me, your school DJ." Katara looked down and there on the podium was the one speaking, a man in tight black clothes who sported orange glasses and a strange neck piece in front. His tall yellow hair stuck high above his body like a cone, for certain catching the eyes of the young waterbender. Present Mike threw his arms up in front of the crowd and smiled. "Come on and let me hear ya." Silence. Keeping it mellow, he gave a slight shake, secretly hating awkward silences. "I'll skip the pre-show and get right down to how this practical exam will go down. Are you ready?" Katara could sense the awkwardness in the quiet room as everyone sat in silence. Poor guy. He's trying to put on a show. Or he just talks like that, she chuckled to herself. Oh my goodness, it's the voice hero present mic, so cool. Katara looked back behind her to the sudden mumbling above. Her eyes caught a green-haired boy blushing like crazy to the teacher below. I listen to his radio show every day of the week. It's so crazy all the staff here are famous and… Oh, shut the hell up, nerd, the spiky-haired blonde boy next to him groaned out. Geez, the poor guy is just excited, Katara frowned seeing the look the angered blonde gave. Now, all of you will be out there conducting 10-minute mock battles in one of our hip urban settings. After I drop the mic, you will head to your specified battle centers, okay? Katara looked down at the card she had in her hand, reading it over until she reached the center. Examinee 17112. Test location, Battle Center C. Her eyes glanced over to Ada's card, feeling disappointed he was in B. She was hoping at least to be with someone she knew, but the test must have been set up to avoid teaming up with people you knew. Her ears suddenly caught the green-haired kid mumbling again. She giggled at how nervous he was, making her not feel so bad herself. Mike continued on with the lecture, the screen suddenly showing 3 different blacked-out shapes. Now there are 3 different villain bot types scattered out through every battle center. Their points are determined by their difficulty, so you better choose wisely. Your goal is to use your quirk to shred through the bots like a mid-song guitar solo, but no attacking other students. Katara brought her hand to her chin as she saw the bots numbered 1 to 3. So it's points by how many you destroy, she whispered to herself. Ida suddenly stood up to Katara's surprise and raised his hand. Excuse me, sir, but I have a question, he pointed to the sheet he held up. On the printout there are 4 different kinds of villains, not 3. With all respect, if this is an error on official UA materials, it is shameful. Katara simply brought a hand to her forehead in embarrassment. Oh gosh, he's at it again. We are exemplary students and expect the best from Japan's most notable school. He turned around and pointed at the green-haired boy. And you with the messy hair, you've been muttering this whole time. Stop that. If you can't bother to take this seriously, then leave. It's distracting to the rest of us. The awkward boy buried his face in his arms. Sorry. Katara glared up at her friend. Wow, you could have just asked please. Ida placed his hand on his chest. I am bounded to keep myself to the utmost standard. And if others mess that up, I have to correct them. Let's pump the brakes there, kiddo. I will answer that booming question, Present Mike answered as the screen lit up with another shape. The last villain type is worth 0 points. It's an obstacle to slow you down. It would be best to avoid it if you can. It can be beaten, but that's kinda pointless. The energetic teacher walked back to the center of the podium. Now that you all got the basics down, let's do that written portion and get it out of the way. Now let me hear that school motto. Give me a plus ultra. Silence. Mike kept his smile on as he looked out. God, kids are dull sometimes. After finishing the surprisingly simple written portion of the test, Katara made her way onto the bus that led to her testing location. Most of the kids had changed into more casual wear to do the practical portion of the exam, helping Katara fit in much better to the crowd. She looked over to Ida walking her direction, her friend now sporting a tight blue tracksuit. She grinned and crossed her arms. You certainly came prepared for this thing. If I did not, then I would not be worthy of being called a hero. He happily exclaimed and gave a bow in her direction. Good luck to you, Katara, and do your best out there. Same to you. I'll see you afterward by the entrance. She returned the bow and smiled. Do your best. Watching him walk away, Katara took a deep breath and turned back towards the C bus line. She went to walk forward towards the line before she bumped into someone crossing in front of her. Oh, I'm sorry about that. I didn't. Watch where the hell you are walking, got it. Katara was shocked by the sudden outburst from the boy, then realizing it was the same blonde who sat next to the mumbling green-haired boy. Okay, I'm sorry. Geez. Katsuki Bakugou sneered and walked right past her. Whatever. Just stay out of my way, hair loops. Glaring, Katara walked after him a few steps. Hey, what's your problem? It was an accident. Bakugou simply turned and raised his palm up in the air. Back off, bimbo. A mix of sparks popped out of his hand, causing Katara to step back in defense. Just be lucky you aren't in my group. I'd blow your goddamn head off. Watching him walk away, Katara felt a cold chill coming from the boy. The enraged vibe he gave off felt similar to what Azula would give, but there was something else. Something deeper she couldn't put a finger on. Taking a breath in, she sighed and was happy she didn't have to go to the same place as that creep. She turned back around and made her way forward with the moving line. Once on the bus, she took one of the empty seats towards the front and sat down. She glanced behind her to see the kind of crowd she was with. A mix of odd and mysterious figures had already sat down. Her mind began guessing what kind of quirks these people must have had. "Hey there, is this seat taken?" "Huh?" The sudden voice to the front caught Katara off guard. She turned back forward and saw the same pink girl from earlier smiling at her. "Ooh, no, it's open." "Cool, I'll sneak right in then." The happy girl in an orange shirt and green shorts hopped in the open seat to her right. She had a small set of horns poking through her hair, not to mention her dark eyes with yellow irises definitely stood out. Unlike the red-eyed bakugou, though, these were filled with joy. "Mina Ashido. Pleasure to meet you." Katara looked down to the hand extended to her, smiling and gripping it. "Kairi Katara. Nice to meet you too." "Katara? Cool name. I'm from Mustafa Middle School. What about you?" "Oh, I'm not from Japan actually. I'm here on an exchange program." Katara watched as Mina's face lit up. "What? That's so awesome. How long you been here?" Katara sighed internally that her fib continued to work. Close to 3 months. It's been pretty interesting." "Yeah, I bet." Mina paused as the bus began rolling towards their destination. "So, you excited for this? I can't wait to get into UA." "Yeah, I've heard so many good things about this place. My friend is the one who got me to come here." "Oh, your friend is taking this too? Nice. That would be sweet if both of you make it in the same class." "Yeah, that would be nice." Katara leaned her head back and looked out the window to the passing trees. At least one familiar face to start school with. Mina held her chin as she looked at the girl next to her. "Well, if we all end up in the same class, then I'll be the one to give you both high fives." Katara laughed at the new girl's positive attitude. "Thanks, I'll hold you to that." The bus suddenly turning down a side road for several minutes, heading towards what looked like a monstrous arena. Katara stuck her face against the glass and stared in awe to the incoming structure. "Is that the place for the test?" Mina whistled to the sight herself, also blown away by its size. "I think so. That thing really must be its own city." As the bus slowed to a stop, Katara stared in awe to the sheer size of the large walls surrounding the testing site. They must have been close to the height of the perimeter wall surrounding Ba Sing Se. And this school said they had multiple locations all like this. They spend all of this money on testing sites? How much do they have? Katara exclaimed as the bus slowed to a stop. "Well, it's UA, of course. This is the biggest school in all of Japan. No wonder they get all of this money." Mina exclaimed as she stood up from the seat. "Let's hit it now." Watching the excited girl walk down the bus, Katara couldn't help but smile as well. She stood up and strapped on her water canteen to her side before following the pink fuzzball down the bus steps. Outside, the rest of the applicants gathered in a large group in front of the tall doors leading into the facility. Inside, she could see what really did appear to be an entire city inside. It was almost too crazy to think this was simply a test site. "This is insane. They just build places like this to get destroyed," she whispered to herself. "All right, kiddos, time to get moving." Katara and all the other kids looked up in confusion to see Mike staring down to them from a raised tower. "Move? What does he?" "In battles, there is no time to sit and think. You got 10 minutes and the clock is ticking. Go." "What?" Katara was caught off guard as all the other contestants sprinted inside of the large replica city. "No more talking? Just, ugh, fine." Annoyed, Katara spun around and sprinted after the other kids running inside. Thanks to her decent speed, she was able to pass up the stragglers in the back. After turning a corner, she was shocked as a green machine came charging straight towards her. "What the?" She skidded to a stop as the robot came rolling at her. She saw pictures of them, but to actually see one was more shocking than she expected. Before she could do anything, however, a strange gray liquid shot out over the robot's head and melted it off. "Huh?" She watched the machine crash on the street in a smoking mess, confused to what just happened. How did this thing? She looked to her right and saw Mina with a large grin on her face, her fingers dripping the same strange material. Keep your head focused, girl, Mina giggled and took off down the road. I'm already at 4. Let's see who gets more. 4? Katara looked to the melted machine and saw a 2 written on the side. Her mind then remembered the point system put in place at the speech. I see. She shook her head clear and focused her sight down the road. Can't fall behind. Time to do this. Running off, she entered a large street where several other teens were already battling several bots. One red-haired girl rushed forward to one, her hands suddenly growing enormous and crushing one of the 2 pointer bots. Whoa, that's a new one, she admitted to herself. Her eyes suddenly saw 2 large robots with 3s on their sides about to crush the big-handed girl. Hey, look out! Flipping her canteen open, Katara brought a large water whip out and slashed through both of them simultaneously. The red-headed Itsuka Kendo looked up in shock before nodding back to her savior. Thanks for that. I owe you one later. I think I'll take that offer. Katara grinned as she formed an ice spike and launched it past Kendo's head into a 2-pointer. Don't let your guard down. Ooh, thanks. Kendo whispered as the waterbender ran past her down the street. She brushed her side braid out of her face and grinned. Who is that girl? Pretty nice quirk she's got there. She watched as the mysterious girl slashed through another 1-pointer in an instant before using her water to capture another small bot. She has a very nice quirk. I'll have to keep an eye on her. All right, there's another. Katara spun around and brought the stream of water over her body and brought it down on another 1-pointer. The small machine crashed down into the street in a crushed mess. Nice, she muttered between pants. At this point, the shock of seeing the small bots had completely disappeared in her head now. They actually reminded her of the test dummies Toph would make during their training exercises with the others, the stone warriors close to the durability of these machines. In fact, by the time she hit 20, she stopped even keeping track of her score. She was too focused on battling the bots to even care about what score she had at this point. There was something else that she was thinking of that she didn't even expect. She did feel it had something to do with the large smile on her face. She was enjoying herself. While she did love the peaceful life she had experienced for the last few months, she couldn't deny the one thing she had been missing. And that was the rush of being in a battle. After having so many in the last year, she had grown used to it to the point that when she didn't, it felt boring. But now, she was able to finally let loose. She chuckled to herself in disbelief while she ran towards another group of bots. Who would have guessed I actually missed this kind of thing? She watched as the 2 small 1-pointers flew in the air above her, only making them perfect targets. She splashed water over both of them and blew a cool stream of air from her mouth. Instantly, both of the droids were encased in thick ice as they stalled and crashed into the ground by her feet. Several of the other kids were in awe as they watched this single water wielder crush her way through the droids. Many of them who only had a few points themselves almost felt like giving up as they stared at this single girl destroy these bots like they were toys. Geez, how are we supposed to compete with that? One of them complained. Yeah, I only got 3 so far. No way I'll get in if there are people this good. Even Mina stopped her battle in amazement as she watched Katara go to work. Damn, she is good. I'm at 20 and she for sure has passed me. Katara couldn't hear the chatter about herself as she continued her streak through the replica town. Her mind was too preoccupied with taking out more robots, she didn't even try to listen. What did shake her thoughts was the enormous rumble that shook the entire arena. What the hell? Katara yelped as she caught her balance. Is that someone's power? One of the buildings in front of her suddenly collapsed, revealing a new robot that towered over the entire street. Katara stepped back in terror as the new machine crushed the ground as it rolled through the street. This is that 4th robot Ida asked about. Her words slowly came out. That thing is huge, and it's worth 0. Dozens of kids sprinted past her in an attempt to get away from the incoming robot, none of them wanting to attempt to take it on. Katara looked back and forth between the crowds and decided she should follow suit. They said it wasn't necessary, so why fight it then? She went to turn and run as well. before her eyes caught a cowering girl behind one of the destroyed point bots. "Hey, get out of there!" Katara watched as the giant bot came closer towards the scared girl, its massive red eye staring directly at her. The trembling blonde looked up and gasped as the robot began reaching down towards her. "Move!" Katara screamed, but the petrified girl couldn't take a step. Grunting, Katara ran forward and threw a stream of water around the girl's waist and yanked her back just before the giant hand came down and crushed her. She caught the still shaking candidate and pushed her behind her. "Go! Get out of here!" Unable to speak, the girl took off along with the other fleeing teens down the road. Katara turned back around as she stared down the incoming monster. Now it was so close there was no way to outrun it. She pulled out the rest of her water and frowned to the amount. "I'm already low from using it earlier, but I'd need a river to fight this thing." 2 minutes left on the clock. Mike's voice rang through the arena, Katara hissing in frustration. "I just have to outlast this stupid thing a little longer." The giant steel hand reached towards the waterbender, her voice yelling out as she launched whatever water she had left and encased its fingers. The robot's hand joints froze instantly, but the small amount was not enough to stop it fully. The icy layer began to fracture as the arm pushed forward. Katara struggled to push back harder, but the power was too much for her small amount of bendable water left. She jumped out of the way just before the hand crushed the spot she was standing in. Standing up, she pulled the minimal ice left back to her and formed a small stream of water on her arm. She glared up as the robot came in for another strike. "Come on, I'm not done here." Katara brought her arm up to slash down, but stopped when a spray of acid hit the base of the robot's hand. The steel began melting and forced the arm to fall to the ground. Her head tilted in confusion to what just happened, before a familiar pink girl hopped by her side. "Now I can't let you have all the fun, can I?" Mina said with a big grin. Katara chuckled at her new acquaintance. "I should be giving you the high five after that save." "Nah, save it for later after the exam is done." Mina swiped her hand, throwing more acid onto the robot's incoming hand, the sizzling steel dissolving 2 of the fingers off. Following suit, Katara slashed the remaining fingers off the hand just before it could grab either of them. "I gotta say, I had no idea your quirk was so cool," Mina yelled as she ran and put her palms on the robot's forearm, melting it instantly. "Me? You are melting it with whatever that stuff is." Katara responded while watching the gray material drip out of the pink girl's skin. She turned back and saw the robot turning towards them to use its other arm. "Get under its body. It's so big it won't be able to reach underneath." "Oh, good idea," Mina yelled, impressed to the sudden plan. They both rushed forward, ducking past the broken and underneath the armpit of the bot. "There, if I freeze it just for a bit, we will be safe under it." Katara took the rest of the water she had and threw it up into the large shoulder pocket of the big machine, freezing it instantly and locking the arm into place. "Now it can't reach down anymore. Now just to let the time." "Perfect, now I can get its arm as well." Mina snickered and formed an acid ball and winded her arm up, causing Katara's eyes to widen. "Wait, don't, if you do that." Her words went unheard as the pink girl threw the ball up into the same spot, melting through the joint entirely. Mina turned and grinned to the waterbender. "Piece of cake." Katara watched in frustration as the arm began breaking off, shooting a glare to the girl next to her. "The arm is going to fall off. Where are we standing right now?" Mina's smile faded as she looked back up as the arm snapped off and fell towards them. "Oops." Before the arm could get closer, both girls were grabbed by a shadowy mass and pulled out from underneath the collapsing robot part. Katara yelled as her body was yanked back and set on the ground near a broken car. What was that? She looked down in shock as the shifting purple-clawed shadow clutching both her and Ashido let go. Her eyes watched as the strange mass flowed up into a bird. "You really need to be smarter than attacking while underneath a large opponent." The bird-headed boy yelled as the dark mass retracted up into his body. Mina scrunched her face and crossed her arms. "Not my fault." "Oh really?" Katara glared at the fuzzy pink girl. "Time's up." The loud bell rang through the testing facility, forcing all the students to look up. Katara sighed and laid back on the ground. "Well, that's over now." The bus ride back to the main school campus felt much shorter than the ride over to the testing site. Probably because the nerves Katara felt were gone, but also because the entire ride back was a non-stop conversation with Mina and their rescuer. "That was so awesome, the way you pulled us like that. So sweet." Mina's words came so fast she didn't even pause to breathe. "Yeah, that was pretty nice," Katara added. "And thanks for saving us back there, Mr. Fumikage Takoyami. And it is nothing special. I just saw you there and you needed help." Takoyami responded calmly. "Katara, nice to meet you." "And Mina Ashido." Takoyami nodded to the both of them. "Pleasure to meet you as well." Katara leaned back in her seat and took a deep breath. "I have to ask, what kind of quirk is that? I've never seen one like that." "My quirk is Dark Shadow." He paused as the head of the shadow bird slowly raised itself out of his stomach. "This shadow creature lives inside of me and I can manipulate to do what I need." The dark shape gave a thumbs up. "That's right." Both girls' eyes widened in shock. "It talks?" "Yes, it has a mind of its own," Takoyami answered as the shadow retracted into his body. "I am actually more impressed with your quirk out there. It is rare to see one like that." Katara tilted her head in confusion. "What do you mean?" "You can control water, but also form it into ice as well. Most quirks are either one or the other." "Yeah, that was crazy watching you out there." Ashido bounced next to Katara in excitement. "I saw how you could freeze and then make it water again and control it. That is really awesome." "Oh, well thanks," Katara smiled and rubbed the back of her head. "I can. My quirk is waterbending, so any form of water I can control it." Takoyami's eyebrow raised at hearing that. "Any form? Does that include vapor as in clouds?" "Wow, good guess." Katara was impressed he mentioned that. Most people forget clouds are just floating water. "I can in fog." "Yes." "Wow, and I thought you could only do water and ice." Mina nodded her head in amazement. "Yeah, thanks." Katara looked out to the window to the main UA building. These two new kids she was talking to seemed kind and friendly enough, but like Lita, she was not about to tell the extent of her bending abilities. Just, not yet. The bus slowly came to a stop in the same parking lot they had left from earlier. The three of them all got up from their seats and made their way off along with the other students. Katara noticed some of the kids getting off had sad and dreary faces, their shoulders hunched over in disappointment. "What's wrong with them?" Mina put her hands on the back of her head and sighed. "Poor guys, they probably know they didn't get enough points." Katara turned back to the pink girl. "Not enough points, so if they don't get enough, they most likely don't get into this school, at least the hero courses." Takoyami finished her statement. Katara suddenly felt a little worried. She stopped counting her points about halfway through, so she didn't know what she ended up with. Mina noticed this and giggled. "Calm down, girl. You dominated out there. You for sure got enough points." "Agreed. You were exceptional out there." Takoyami added. "If the school was watching students in each area, you were for certain on their radar." He turned and gave a sigh towards Mina. "You should worried about your reckless act with the judges." Mina's cheeks puffed out as she frowned at the bird boy. "Hey, I didn't know what was going to happen." Katara shrugged her shoulders. "I mean, you melted its arm while we were under the arm." Mina stuck her tongue out in frustration. "I was in the moment. Your ice move was so cool I had to follow up." "Perhaps you should have just left it to Katara. I think she had it covered pretty well," Takoyami added. Katara smiled at their compliments. "Thanks. You both were really good out there too." She looked around as she saw other candidates walking out and grabbing their bags. "So, we are just done now?" Mina gave a nod. "Yep. Now we just await the results to be sent to us." "All right then." Katara gave a nod to the two before her. "Well, I should get going then. It was nice meeting both of you." Takoyami returned the nod. "Likewise. Perhaps we will be in the same class." "I'll be counting on that." Mina happily answered and held up a peace sign. "I'll be seeing you two in school soon." Watching her walk away, the remaining two looked to each other and gave one final nod. "Until next time, Katara," Takoyami said. Same to you. Good luck, Katara responded. After he turned and left as well, Katara placed her hands on her hips and leaned back. Well, guess that's it for this whole entrance exam then. She let out a sigh in relief, knowing this was all she had to do for the testing. Sure, the written part she thought she did okay on, but the practical portion is where it mattered. After hearing what the other two said about her, she now felt much more confident in herself. Kinda wish I kept track of my score now, she mumbled to herself. She looked around as many of the kids were heading through the hallways into the school back towards the entrance. Looking back, she noticed that Ida's bus had not returned yet. Maybe they got held up? Shrugging her shoulders, she decided to follow the others through the school and make her way out. Might as well wait for him out front then. Walking over to the storage area, she found her bag in the mix and slipped it on. She turned and walked through the doors of the school and made her way down the large hallways. She couldn't help from letting her eyes wander around the beautifully designed flooring and architecture. Seeing how clean and wonderfully kept it was showed this place did have top-of-the-line funds to keep it going, although simply looking at the testing facilities would have given that away. She began to feel a swell building up in her chest, knowing she may be coming here very soon. Sure, studying and all those tests she did with Tenya weren't her favorite thing, but she knew what it meant. She wanted to be able to help people. She would need to come here and earn that right to stand on the front line to help others. To be a hero. A smile crept across her face as she looked to her future. Her eyes continued to look around the grand school, but then she stopped walking when she caught view of a sign down a side hallway. Recommendations entrance? The empty hallway was lined with multiple chairs all the way until the hall turned down another path. She hadn't heard anything from Tensei or Tenya about recommendations for the exam, so her mind began making its own guesses. Curiosity overtaking her, Katara walked down the corridor towards the end. Turning, she saw it led to a single door around the bend. There was a small check-in sheet hanging on the wall by the door's handle, drawing her closer as she tried to see what it was. Before she could see what was on the page, the door opened up and a body walked out and bumped into the girl blocking the path. Oh, Katara caught herself before falling and rubbed her head awkwardly. Sorry about that, I was just wondering what was. In that moment, Katara felt her heart stop beating in her chest. Her hands began shaking as sweat formed on her forehead. A cold chill ran up her spine when she laid eyes on the familiar flames coming from the man's face underneath his cold, blue eyes. Her breath came in short gaps as her shaking feet struggled to keep her body standing up. Why you again? Well, look who just happened to show up here. Endeavor's cold glare burned through the young girl's soul as he stepped towards her. I was wondering when I was going to see you again, you little rat. So you finally came out of your hiding place? Endeavor sneered as he stepped towards the scared waterbender. I was curious how long it would be until you showed your face again. Katara swallowed hard as she moved backwards from the enraged hero, his cold eyes seemingly staring through her soul. If luck was an ability, she would have most certainly had the worst of it. She hadn't seen him since that first night she arrived in Japan, and was hoping to keep it that way for as long as she could. But now, he was here right in front of her. She took a deep breath and glared back at him. Not like I was hiding in a hole. I had someone kind who offered me a place to stay. Ah yes, I heard from the chief you were going to be staying with your little hero, young Ingenium. The hotshot rookie aide, he sneered. That boy always offers help to those who are lost. He gave a snicker towards the girl in front of him. Or have no purpose being there. Her blood ran hot hearing those words, her fists clenching at her sides. Tensei has helped me in ways I can never forget. I will always be in his debt. He laughed to her reaction. Oh, calling him by his first name? The pet seems to have gotten attached to its master. Endeavor felt a bit of joy seeing her teeth clench in anger before he crossed his arms. I don't know what kind of bullshit story you fed to the two of them about your situation, but I know a snake when I see one. Katara's fists shook in anger to his accusations towards her. More importantly, the insults he made towards the people that helped her through this time made it worse. So, what are you going to do? Take me in for more questioning. Her eyes noticed his fists emit a small glow, causing her to regret saying that could be arranged. He snickered before dissipating his fire fists. but I'd rather not cause trouble for my prize exam tomorrow. Katara raised her eyebrow in confusion. Your prize? Of course, why do you think I would be here? He nodded towards the recommendation sign near the door. He's above you basic kids, so his test is different than yours. I made sure that I made him that way. As he walked past her, Katara realized what he was talking about, feeling a sickening taste rise inside of her. Made your kid that way? Is that all that matters to you? He stopped walking and turned his head back to face her. It's not like some peasant girl like you would ever understand. My ambition will drive him to be greater than any of you. His mouth curled up into a sinister grin. Don't worry, I'm not going to even bring any of this to him. If by some miracle a rat like you makes it into Yua, I'll let him simply overshine all of you would-be heroes. The young waterbender's breath came in deep inhales as she fought to control her anger. She didn't know this kid of his, but her mind immediately thought to the deranged daughter of the Fire Lord she had engaged multiple times with. Before she could respond, his cold voice rang through the hallways once more. And by the way, girl, I still haven't forgotten the trouble you caused back then. Even if you claim to have changed, I'll say this. You take a step out of line again, and I'll personally be the one to put you away. After those words, the flame hero was out of sight, leaving the angered Katara standing alone in the hallway. In the back of the main Yua building, a darkened room held many figures overlooking the dozens of screens lining the main wall. The rows of teachers eyed the many students across the monitors, eyeing the ones that really caught their attention. Amazing, this year's students are quite remarkable, Midnight whispered out loud, giving her lips a quick lick. It's been a while since we had so many extraordinary kids at once. Agreed, the gray Cementos responded as he typed on the keypad to pull up the scoreboard for battle points. Number 1 for sure caught my attention. Many of the staff all started murmuring to themselves when a member from testing group came on screen. This one, Katsuki Bakugou, scored 77 battle points alone. That's towards the school record. Agreed, his raw power and battle prowess are leagues above many of the others. A small bear mouse creature spoke, but he does not seem concerned about others when they needed assistance. So rescue points may be scarce for him in the judging section. Scarce? Perhaps non-existent. Powerloader chuckled to himself. Yes, but there are 2 others that I really want to discuss as well. The small principal moved the keyboard and blew up the screen from testing ground B, revealing a certain green-haired boy launch into the sky towards the large 0-pointer. This boy, izukumidoriya, while didn't receive any battle points, risked everything to save another student. Principal Nezu smiled and scrolled forward in the video. He was able to completely destroy a 0-point battle droid. It's been years since we have seen that. True, but those injuries are quite severe that he sustained. The eerie voice of ectoplasm answered. And yet he rushed in knowing the risk, just to save another. A skeletal-looking man with yellow hair responded. Only a true hero would do something like that. Nezu gave a small smile to his skinny friend, knowing exactly who the green-haired child was. He turned back to the screen and scrolled to his next student. Now this is one I was a bit surprised on as well. In testing ground C. The screen changed to a video of Katara slashing through the many robots in the street. Her water cut them like they were nothing more than cardboard. Midnight grinned and adjusted her small mask. Now there is one to watch. Very unique quirk she has. Cementos nodded in agreement as he watched her freeze a few more bots. Ah yes, I noticed her earlier as well. She has quite a variable quirk to go between both ice and water at her choice. She is one of the more talented ones I've seen at this early of an age. The skinny Toshinori Yagi watched in amazement to the video in front of him. Something about this girl he was seeing was different than the other students. The way she moved, the style of fighting she was using, it was second nature to her. She was definitely no newbie when it came to using her abilities. He then watched as she rushed headfirst to save someone else, just like his own protege did in his own testing ground. He gave a small smile as the young girl on screen used her water to hold back the massive robot. So young Midoriya, you aren't the only one who is willing to risk anything to save others. He whispered to himself. This may be a very interesting group of students. The ride on the train from the school back to the Ida household felt silent for Katara. her mind still reeling from the encounter she had with the sickening man supposedly called a hero. Everything sounded hollow, from the clicking of the wheels to the many chatting voices of the people around her. She didn't even notice the voice to her right until she felt a hand on her shoulder. "Katara, you okay?" "Huh?" She turned in confusion to Tenya staring at her. His eyes were filled with concern. "What's wrong?" "I've been trying to get your attention for almost a minute and you never even turned my direction," he said. "Oh, sorry," she fake chuckled and rubbed her head. "My head was just a little stressed after the exam. I was worried how I ended up doing." "Well, what was your score by the end of it?" Now she felt awkward with him asking this part, for she didn't even know. "Well, I kinda stopped keeping score by the time I was around 20. Tenya's eyes nearly burst through his glasses at hearing that, his arms suddenly chopping furiously. "Katara, how could you be so foolish? Losing track of your progress is a horrendous mistake." "Hey, easy, she frowned at him. "I was by that only a few minutes in. I kept going after that towards the end." He put his hand to his chin as he listened to her. "I see. Well, I was able to score 52 points myself." Hearing that really caught Katara's attention, her head perking up more than before. "Whoa, really? That's amazing. That was for sure more than what I got. I am sure you did well yourself." He gave a reassuring smile to her as the train came to their stop. They both stood up and walked off together. "I have seen your quirk in use, and if you did anything like that during the exam, then you would have done excellent." She smiled at his compliment, rubbing her arm as they walked through the train station. "The last few minutes I was held up by that big 0-point robot they had, though." Tenya froze in place at her words. "You what? You fought against that thing?" She lifted her eyebrow in surprise to his reaction. "Yeah, I did. There was a girl who wasn't moving, so I had to get her out of the way. And fighting is a strong word. More like..." She shrugged when she tried thinking of the right word. Held it back. She looked back at him expecting criticism for not running away like the teachers recommended. Instead, she was shocked to see him suddenly slap his face with both hands. "What did you do that for?" Tenya's hands shot forward and latched onto Katara's shoulders to her surprise as he started shaking her. "Katara, did you know there was more to this test as well? You also battled one of those things to save someone?" "What are you talking about?" Katara managed out between shakes. "I just helped someone." He let go of her arms, forcing her to check her neck for whiplash. "What the heck was that about? What do you mean more?" Tenya took a breath and adjusted his glasses. "In my testing ground I encountered the large obstacle as well. When confronted, I turned and avoided it along with most of the other students." Her ears perked up when he said that. "Most?" He gave a slow nod to her. "Do you remember that one boy in the conference room? The one who kept distracting us?" "Distracting?" Katara then pictured the awkward green-haired boy that was behind them, his freckled face for some reason sticking in her mind. "Yeah, the one you scolded. Why?" "He was in my group for the test, and he had 0 points by the end of the exam." "What? He didn't get any?" She frowned, feeling bad for the boy now. She saw how excited he was to be at the school, and to end up with nothing must have crushed him. "Well, that is the thing," Tenya added. "Towards the end of the exam he rushed in to save girl who was trapped and destroyed the machine by himself, but..." "Wait," Katara cut him off as her mind started working overtime. "You mean he destroyed the 0.1 all by himself?" "Correct. In fact, he took it out with a single attack. If her jaw could have touched the floor, it would have at that moment. While she was low on water, she could tell by how much resistance she felt those bots were no easy task. And to hear this seemingly timid boy had eradicated one all alone with one strike to say the least. How in the world did he end up with no points then?" Tenya sighed as he continued walking once more. "The problem about his quirk, however, is it seems there are harsh consequences to using it. He broke his arm and both legs after the attack." "Wait, what?" She shouted out in shock before looking around in embarrassment. She waved sorry to a passing family before looking back at him. "He broke his limbs? What kind of power was it?" "I believe it was just strength. He jumped all the way to its head and punched it, which destroyed it, but it seems as if he cannot control his ability yet." Katara fell silent in disbelief as they continued down the road back towards the house. She couldn't believe there were powers here that worked like that, destroying your own body to the point it actually breaks. With bending there was always the risk of overexertion, but nothing to this extent. Or could they? She had never heard of that before, but maybe if pushed far enough, bending could be dangerous to the user. She shook her head to clear those thoughts as they came to the steps of the large Ida household. They went through the doors and could tell that everyone else was gone at the moment. Tenya took his bag off and stretched his shoulders, releasing a satisfied moan. Now that exam is over, I really should get back to finishing my finals paper due next week. All right, I'll leave you to it then. Katara removed her shoes and started walking towards her room. I'm gonna lay down for a bit. Are you not feeling well? Tenya asked. She gave a small nod to him. I'm fine. I just want to rest my head for a little. Well, if you need anything, let me know. Rest up, Katara. Tenya finished with a wave and then headed to his own room. As he walked off, Katara sighed to herself and made her way down the hall and into Tensei's place. She went to the couch and slumped down onto the couch and groaned out loud. She once again hated not telling the truth to why she was stressed. The test itself was not the problem. It was the fact of who she ran into after. Why did it have to be him of all people? She moaned as she rubbed her forehead. That so-called hero, Endeavor. How was a man like that considered the number 2 hero in this country? From the time she encountered him, nothing about him felt warm or comforting, and from she had seen from others, that person was nothing to what a hero should be. Anger, hatred, desire. Those were the only things she felt from him. Nothing like the other man she had learned of recently and seen on the TV occasionally. All might, she whispered out. The great hero that had taken this world by storm was for sure something else. It was more than his seemingly unstoppable power, for his very punches created gusts that even an awakened avatar would be jealous of. No, that isn't what caught the waterbender's attention about him. It was his charming personality, his warm demeanor, and his never-ending smile were what gave that golden glow that she had grown accustomed to over the last few months. That is what made her feel good when she saw him on the news talking or in action saving someone. That is what she saw as being a hero. And now, from what she heard from him, this Endeavor would be having a kid be in the same school as her at the same time. Knowing how bad this flame hero was, she figured his kid was just as bad. She cringed at the thought of dealing with another Azula all over again. She tried shutting her eyes to clear her head, but that only brought back the image of that crazed girl coming for her. Blue fire, yellow eyes, and that bolt of lightning shooting directly for her heart. Katara's fist clenched, and she sat back up. Her brow was sweating again, mostly out of frustration now. That idiot thinks I'll just be a stepping stone for his kid. That's not going to happen. She stormed her way out of the living room back to the main household, walking through the halls towards the pool. Not even caring it was still the day, she needed to clear her head her way into the pool area. She kicked her socks off real quick and yanked her outer shirt off real fast, leaving her in pants and a tank top. She huffed out and turned towards the water. If he thinks I'll be a stepping stone, forget it, she yelled out. Katara raised her hands and brought several pillars of water up along the edge of the pool and froze them in place. She walked past her makeshift targets onto the surface freezing beneath her feet as more crept onto her hands. Small ice spikes formed on her fingertips while she closed her eyes and breathed. She focused her mind, imagining the enraged Fire Nation princess once again. Emotions of anger and fear creeping back into her heart, something she never wanted to experience again. Clenching her teeth, she spun around and launched her mini ice spikes into the several pillars around her, the small projectiles piercing the columns. She immediately whipped out another stream of water and sliced one of them completely in half. Not hesitating, she quickly pulled a small wave of water and threw it into another, pulling the ice off the concrete edge into the pool. Not this time, she grunted as she formed a single large hook on the end of another water whip. Lashing forward, she pierced the side of the remaining column and yanked it towards her and into the water. The large splash erupted out and washed over her body, water slowly pouring down her face, but she didn't care. Her eyes were focused on what may come her way. The flame hero came into her mind again, her teeth clenching in anger. I won't sit by and let his words hold me back. The next week seemed to go by in an instant, every day her studying and training seeming to pass in a blur. The thought of having to wait so long to get the results were becoming more stressful than the exam itself at this point. Even as she sat and ate dinner with Tensei, her mind kept playing different scenarios inside her head every day to what the school was going to say. She glanced over at her host and watched as he was focused reading over documents from his office, not noticing her gaze. She never told him about running into Endeavor at the school, figuring the less drama for Tensei the easier it would be. She sighed as she reached down and took another bite of her rice and swallowed. Stuff on your mind? Katara choked for a moment from the sudden question, coughing a few times before she looked at Tensei, his eyes still glued onto his paper. You cough could tell? You've been especially quiet the last few days, and you keep staring over towards me as we are eating, he said as he took a sip of his soda. She frowned and drank some water herself. Was it that obvious? Well, I wouldn't be a hero if I didn't notice. He gave her a small smirk, then his face softened. What's been bothering you? She took a breath and set her drink back down. It's just waiting for the results. I didn't know it was going to take this long. He gave a chuckle hearing that. I know it's annoying. Trust me, I had to wait close to this long as well. With so many applicants, they have a lot of kids to get through and score. It will be here soon. I know. It's just, Katara huffed out and leaned onto the table. What if for some reason I don't get accepted? What would I do then if I can't help people? Katara, just because you don't get into the hero course here doesn't mean it's the end. There are many kinds of other courses to be enrolled in, and if you prove yourself enough, you can still be transferred to the hero course. Her eyes lit up a little hearing that, seemingly taking some of the weight off her chest. Really? Well, if that is the case then. It's here. Both of them jumped in shock as the door to the main house burst open. Tensei flipped around as his eyes shot open. Mom, what was that about? Madoka was shaking with excitement as she bolted into the room past her son and right up to Katara. It's here, it's here, it's here, she kept yelling at the top of her lungs. What's going on? Katara yelped in confusion. What's here? A few moments later, the Ida father Toki came in huffing and puffing. Honey, I told you that you can't just barge in like that, he wheezed out from chasing her. I'm sorry, Madoka squealed in excitement as she whipped up the letter she was holding in the air. But this was just dropped off. It's your results for you, Katara's heart skipped a beat as her eyes fell onto the parchment in front of her, especially since she was literally just talking about this a few moments earlier. Her hands slowly reached up and grabbed the sealed letter from the bouncing mother. Madoka wiggled back and forth as she watched the young girl eyed the letter. Well, come on, let's see what they said. Open it. Toki put a hand on his wife's shoulder and stopped her hopping. Honey, come on. We agreed to let Tenya open his in private. It's only fair to let her do the same. Tensei's mother pouted and began sulking. Come on, I want to know what they both got. Why wait? Mom, Tensei groaned. This is special for her. Let her do this on her own. Fine. Madoka moaned out and crossed her arms. But promise you will let us know what they say. Katara didn't say anything, just giving a small nod as she slowly got up from her chair and walked off towards her room, shutting the door behind her. Her eyes never left the paper she held, fingers reaching for the seams before she stopped, hands for some reason unable to tear it open. She set it down in front of her and moved back, her behind finding the soft end of the mattress and sitting back. She sat on the edge of her bed for what felt like 10 minutes as she stared at the letter sitting on the dresser. While she was somewhat excited to find out the news of what the school said to her, she now felt the slight hint of nervousness creeping into her. What if she didn't score enough, or did something wrong that she wasn't supposed to do? But, was sitting her waiting to see what they said going to make it any different? Grunting to herself, she stomped over to the letter and shredded at the top of the parchment. She reached in to grab the letter to read the results, but was caught off guard when she found a small gray disc instead. Huh? What's this? She held up the item to her face, trying to figure out what it was. Is this like another test? We open it up and try to wah. She yelped out when the top of the flat portion began glowing, causing her to drop it back down. It landed flat and suddenly a small screen illuminated in the air. Booyah, I am here as a projection. Katara stepped back in shock when the booming voice of the #1 hero came through the device, and the all-so-famous smile beaming down towards her. Allmight, what is this? Her shaky legs shuffled her back and guided her to sit down on the bed. Why would he be on this? She had no idea why the top hero in all of Japan was on a video sent from the school talking to her now. Ah ha ha ha. Yes, you may be shocked as to what I am doing here, right? Well, you may be shocked to realize that I am not here to just say hi. You are looking at the newest UA faculty member. Her eyes nearly bugged out of her head when she heard those words. She had heard that UA had some of the most elite teachers out of all the schools. But now, the best hero the world had ever seen was going to be one of the ones teaching her how to be a hero. It was almost too good to be true for her to believe. So, young Katara. What? Katara yelped when she heard her name. He's talking directly to me? She didn't realize the entrance letters were going to be so personalized. You were able to pass the written exam, although you did miss a few things here and there. She frowned when she heard that. Great, guess it wasn't so easy. Maybe I do need to study more. But not to worry, his eccentric voice seemingly responded to her. The practical portion is what mattered most for the hero course, and you did excellent. He moved and a large chart popped on screen. Your villain points tally was an impressive 44. 40? Katara sat up straight in surprise when she heard that. She had been curious the whole time what her score was, but to hear it actually amazed her. She then noticed on the list of names, hers was in 6th. She then saw 2 familiar names above hers, Takoyami and Ida. She chuckled to herself, seeing Tenya above her, feeling a drive to do better next time. Can't make it too boring. But we aren't stopping there. There is more to this than just battling villains. Katara tilted her head in confusion to what he meant, but then watched as part of the screen changed to her during the test. That was, they recorded this. The video showed her taking out the robots above the red-headed girl she came across, and then to when she pulled the scared blonde girl away from the large zero-pointer. You weren't just satisfied with getting a good score. You reacted on instinct and helped those who needed it. That is the true essence of a hero. Katara suddenly felt a strange sensation in her chest, thinking back to the very words that Tensei told her the first night she arrived here, and now she was hearing the same thing from the top hero. Not only that, but your actions inspired others to react as well. 2 familiar faces popped on the screen next to hers. Ashido and Takoyami, Katara said out loud as video of them aiding her against the large bot started playing. And that is where rescue points come in. The chart behind him changed, revealing a new set of points as well. Kairi Katara. 55 rescue points. Katara's heart rate jumped through the roof at the sight of the new score next to her name. Along with the other points and the new ones she had just received, now her new total was 999, her mouth barely uttered out in disbelief. Mina Ashido, 25 rescue points, and Tefumikage Takoyami, 40 rescue points. Allmight smiled even larger as the new scores updated behind him. Katara's eyes drifted from the hero to the numbers on the screen, and what she saw took all the strength from her legs away. Her body slid down the end of the bed and her bottom ended on the floor. She barely breathed in disbelief as the order of names shifted to the new scores, and where hers ended up took every fiber in her body not to faint in disbelief. She was in first place. You've all passed the exam, Allmight exclaimed as his fist opened up to the camera, seemingly offering it to the stunned waterbender. Congratulations, Katara. You have made it. You are part of the Hero Academia. Katara sat in silence and utter shock to the news she had just received, but after a few moments a large smile crept across her face. She eventually stood back up and couldn't help but clench her fists and throw them up. Yes, I did it, I did it. She cheered happily as the small disc shut off, leaving her alone once more. It didn't matter now, though, for she now knew she was one step closer to being able to help others. Across the household, Tenya sat in his room and had also finished watching his hologram projector as well. He sat in silence not just to the shock from being accepted into the greatest school in Japan, for that would have been enough. He, however, took notice of the scoreboard that revealed his placement along with the other top 10 students, and a familiar name was sitting at the top in first place. He couldn't help but feel happy, and yet, a slight pain in his chest at being so outclassed. He knew Katara was good, but to nearly double his score, that was an entirely different story. He couldn't help but chuckle out loud. So, it seems you are joining me as well at UA. You really are amazing, Katara. Now let's see who becomes a hero first. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Dragonfire 217 on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.